Hello, Brian Weeks here again with another MMCD contract consideration. This video clip will cover the topic of the role of the inspector, and it's a companion video to the one titled The Roles of the CA and the one titled The Limitations of the CA's Authority. Although the role of an inspector on a project is often a vital one, sometimes the project is just not large enough or complex enough to warrant an inspector. This is okay with the MMCD, as our documents are designed to be flexible enough to deal with most municipal infrastructure projects. While there might not be an inspector, there must be a contract administrator. The reason for this is that the role of the site inspector contains only a subset of the necessary authority and responsibility of the CA. GC 3.4.6 is the general condition that potentially authorizes there be one or more site inspectors on a project. It says in part, quote, "The contract administrator may, by written notice to the contractor, appoint a site inspector to assist the contract administrator in the administration of the contract and in reviewing the progress and quality of the work." Note that the notice must be in writing. Just as for the CA, the inspector must be a person, not a firm or organization. This is required so the contractor has absolute knowledge of whose signature has the authority to direct the contractor to do something which may obligate the owner to pay additional money or award additional time. From time to time, this can be an administrative problem. For example, if the regular site inspector is away and the CA decides to send someone new, the new person has no authority as a site inspector until his appointment has been presented in writing to the contractor, normally via the superintendent. Until this occurs, the superintendent not only does not have to take instructions from the new person, but could also refuse entry to the site, as the person is not authorized to be there. As the inspector's authority derives from the CA, the role ends not later than when the CA's role ends at total performance. GC 3.4.7 states in part, "The contract administrator's authority to inspect the work, reject the work, order testing, or otherwise review the work shall be for the benefit of the owner, and such authority shall not give rise to any duty or responsibility on the contract administrator or the owner to the contractors, subcontractors, or their agents, employees, or other persons performing any of the work to inspect or review the work." Thus, the inspector acts as an agent of the owner, owing nothing to the contractor except for items the contractor has a right to expect from the owner, such as cooperation and timeliness to avoid delays. Just as the CA is required to be impartial, when portions of that role are delegated, the inspector must also be impartial. There are a few points to note about site inspection. Number one, unless otherwise restricted in the contract documents, the contractor is entitled to have inspection services available at any time it is permissible to be working. This is usually controlled by municipal bylaws. Number two, an authorized inspector is entitled to have access to the work at all reasonable times. Number three, the inspector is also entitled to have access to all locations where work is in progress, not just the point of installation. For example, at a precast concrete factory. Number four, when on site, the inspector is subject to all safety requirements and rules imposed by the contractor. For example, the contractor may require all persons coming onto the site to have a formal site safety orientation, or to park in designated areas, or to wear certain personal protective equipment. Failure to comply with such rules can potentially expose the owner to safety sanctions from WorkSafe BC or jeopardize the requirement for the contractor to be the prime contractor for WCB purposes. Number five, neither the CA nor the inspector is required to be on site every day. GC 3.4.1 requires the CA to visit the site at appropriate intervals to remain familiar with the progress and quality of the work. Assuming that the site inspector is properly authorized, what contract functions can he or she perform? GC 3.4.6 goes on to say, quote, "A site inspector may exercise the authority of the contract administrator, as set out in the contract documents, to inspect work, to reject work, or to order special inspections, and to make other orders at the place of the work." End quote. As you can see, the emphasis is on evaluation of the quality of the work performed. I interpret the phrase "make other orders" to authorize the site inspector to do things such as set up procedures for inspections, manage paperwork flow, and even issue a stop work if a life safety hazard is present. However, as I mentioned, the site inspector only has a subset of the authority of the CA. There are a number of tasks that are specifically restricted to the contract administrator. Typically, these are things that relate to payment and project completion. In particular, only the CA may sign off as approved each progress payment, even though the site inspector will normally track quantities eligible for payment and prepare the forms. Number 2, sign change orders approving an alteration to the contract price or time milestones, even though the inspector may well have been the person to initiate the contemplated change order and the request for quotation. Number 3, issue the certificates of substantial and total performance. Again, even though the inspector may be the person who has been tracking the deficiencies for holdback purposes. Number 4, make the initial decision on contract interpretation and claims for extra money or time. Number 5, evaluate the performance of both parties to the contract, even though the inspector may be the person who has the most first-hand knowledge of the situation. Of course, the inspector will also perform a number of administrative functions for the CA as determined by the CA or the owner. Chief among these is to be the eyes of the CA on the job, keeping records of events, quality, quantities, progress, and delays. Record keeping of quantities and deficiencies by contract line item and the initial drafting of the progress claim often fall to the inspector. The CA may also involve the inspector in the preliminary evaluation of claims for more money or time, review of drawings, calculations for force account payments, and quantity variation adjustments. Finally, the inspector is often charged with being the liaison between the owner's forces and the contractor, or between the owner and the public. So, to summarize, the role of the inspector is not mandatory, although the role of the CA is. If present, the inspector must be authorized in writing, and the role terminates not later than total performance. The inspector has a limited subset of the responsibilities of the CA, and these are mostly to do with quantity and quality verification. The inspector need not be on site every day, but must be generally familiar with the progress of the work. The inspector works for the owner and owes only a duty to the contractor to be fair and not to interfere or delay the work. When on site, the inspector is obliged to comply with all safety requirements set out by the contractor. The inspector is entitled to inspect wherever work is being performed, which will form part of the contract work. Beyond the contract requirements, the inspector will have duties to assist the CA and the owner with liaison, project documentation, and possibly document evaluation. I hope this has helped clarify this contract consideration. Please check our website for further assistance and to see what other topics are presented in this series. Thanks for watching.